I wanted to just spend a few minutes on what the sort of a broad, some overarching themes, and then what seems to be really important at the moment, and then what else is related to what I do at Housing and Community Development that I came up to Sacramento to do. I don't know how successful I'll be.
Very.
And then, no, I don't know, and because it's getting harder to do anything, at least meaningful. And you know, working in a city, it has to become real pretty quickly. It has to get traction, or you have to let it go. Sacramento is different. The ideas sort of float longer and swirl around. So anyway, five overarching themes that I've sort of had in my mind's eye since I got appointed to CalHFA in early 2011. First of all, we all need to diversify funding sources for affordable and housing and other community development programs. The bond funds that we were relying on and have been really successful, Prop 1C, Prop 46, they're on the wane, and redevelopment's gone. That's what it is, and we have to figure out a way to support cities in their infrastructure needs, in their growth needs, in affordable housing needs. In a different reform, that's a broad category, but you all know, because you're in this business, we've got to make it simpler. We've got to streamline CEQA, however that goes, receiving funding, applying for a program. We've got to figure out a better way and a quicker way to do stuff. Infrastructure, big, although the governor says, what exactly is infrastructure? I say it's when you can flush your toilet in 20 years, because we've really kept a pace with the sewer capacity, right? I mean, it's sewer, storm drains, street lights, remaking a city to become friendly, closer to transit, smart growth, density. How do you do that? Particularly for older urban areas, and a lot of you folks do infill. That's hard, it is complicated, it never works perfectly, and how, again, do you do that in a way that's supportive of cities, gets them what they need, and then obviously makes development work better. We have a big mandate for greenhouse gas reduction, energy and water conservation, and that's all part of a big cadre of initiatives the governor has to switch up how we've done development in California. And the whole cap and trade revenue, the greenhouse gas reduction, smart growth, sustainable growth, higher density growth is all part of that. And finally, just being more efficient and cost effective, including you know, cycling through layers of bureaucracy, getting what you need in a more straightforward way, and then getting the assistance you need to help you do what you do. Regulatory reform. My favorite, CEQA. So we have a couple of things that are going on at once, a constellation of factors that could be either very beneficial or very troubling. So we've got the Environmental Goals and Policy Report, which has been put out by OPR. It's the first time in 12 or 15 years. EGPR. And that sets forth broad environmental goals for the state, and having people comply in their policies and their practices as much as possible. We've got the CEQA guidelines update. So that has mostly been drafted, and again, there's been a long time between those CEQA guidelines updates, and this is the first update in about 10 years, maybe even longer. I think the first one, the last one was the early 2000s. And that's a general update. And then there's the updates pertaining to how you do vehicle, traffic and transportation analysis under the bill SB 743, and that's the calculations of vehicle miles traveled rather than level of service. So in addition to that, there's the general plan guidelines that are being rewritten. So this is all being promulgated by OPR. And to have that come down all at once may be a good thing, and it may be a very complicated thing. So I've been tracking that pretty closely, particularly the CEQA stuff, and trying to make sure that the practical orientation of people using those guidelines every day and working with those guidelines gets put into the mix in terms of conversation in the state. We've got to change it around. We've got to figure out other things that work, other procedures, other other ways of doing things. Part of it's construction related, part of it's regulatory reform, and that, increasing the supply will go a long way, regardless of it being housing for, the lower income or workforce housing.
Because again, market rate housing is getting to be significantly more expensive, and in particular, the school bond that just came off of the ballot means that we could be going to level 3 school fees in a lot of jurisdictions. And since there are people who definitely on that side of the room know a lot more about how they're calculated, with that background, is there a plan to address school fees, which plays so importantly into both affordable and market rate housing going forward, since our supply is low, and with those increased fees going from, for example, $6 a square foot to $12 a square foot is going to make building in some communities just downright feasible.
Yeah, there were some lively discussions about that school bond. And the need and how you sort of distribute that, how it needs to get distributed. There's an equity argument there, but I believe that's going to be revisited soon. I heard rumors to that effect. So it's not dead, it's just dead for this election. It was the water bond and the rainy day fund. And it is an important set of factors, and you are not the first one to say about, to say what's going to happen, how those fees are going to escalate, and how that obviously affects the affordability of housing. Because obviously they're transferred to the folks who are going to buy that.
One of the things we at BIA look at very closely are housing element updates, and it's kind of really our opportunity on the residential side to make sure that cities are doing the best they can to make sure that housing is feasible and actually planning for that housing. The questions that we look at the most are the impediments and the constraints, and we work with your staff quite a bit in making sure that cities analyze those constraints as they go forward. The school fees is a difficult one because that's at the state level, and we need funding, and there are going to need to be solutions to that, because going to level 3 fees is just going to kill projects. But almost something that I think even more than that nobody's really paying attention to are the affordable housing development impact fees that are coming forward now. Now, most of us, in the residential side, we agree that we bear some responsibility for addressing affordable housing needs, although we feel that it's a societal issue, and that just putting affordable housing construction on the backs of new residential construction is extremely short-sighted and doesn't even get close to fulfilling the need, and actually diminishes the housing supply that you eloquently said that we agree we've been falling short of for probably decades now at this point. So what we look at these development impact fees, this new Nexus methodology, in light of, I think, the fact that everybody is fairly certain we're going to win the San Jose lawsuit that will now call affordable housing, inclusionary zoning, and exaction, which will require a Nexus study. These new Nexus studies purport to, I think Hayward's, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Hayward's new study they just came out with says $81,000 per market rate unit, and then $50,000 on, or 81 on for sale, 50,000 on rental. I mean, these fees are astronomical. I mean, there's where you're paying right now, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a unit. I mean, these are going to double, triple, much more substantial than the school fee impact. And so, I guess the question is, it's a difficult situation. I understand that, but as in your position, your staff, especially in the Bay Area, with the One Bay Area grant funding requiring in this cycle that all cities have a housing element update, all 100 plus of them are doing it on the front end of the cycle, whereas before they oftentimes wait till the end or not even have one at all. Now they're all going for it. So we're looking on how we, with a staff of 6 or 7, look at all these jurisdictions and look at the constraints section and look at the fees. And so just how your staff and how you look at addressing these issues going forward.
Important points, and I welcome further dialogue on them, because I think they're all our problem in making housing work better. The market in this state, price and geography have never, it just is a very big set of constraints. And so we're all part of the solution. And again, there's obviously different opinions about Nexus studies and whether that really works, and charging that. I mean, if that's the going freight, we've got to figure it out. And again, part of the evolution in housing elements is that although each community has to be assessing their need and the diversity of needs and other factors in their housing market, and obviously reserving sites, you have to raise up to a regional or sub-regional level what we do about meeting some broader needs like affordable housing. And you know, I'm of the mind that we should figure out a different strategy to get affordable housing into communities. And it's not community by community. We've been looking way too small for most of the 30 or 40 years of a housing element. What other strategies are there? And a number of communities through their SCS strategies and other coalitions are starting to look in a broader way about how we all share in that responsibility. And it's not just off the backs of people who have to pay for the new house. It can't be. We can't sustain that.
And that's encouraging to hear, because you know, a lot of what we face through many jurisdictions throughout the Bay Area is just a must-build requirement, which is a 10, 15, which I think is extremely short-sighted, because you're going to get your 1, 2, 3 units where you know, pulling together funds and working with nonprofit developers, you know, is a much better option. Another thing is, you know, take the city of San Jose for example, and this. I don't know that it's necessarily an adopted. I think it's a general plan policy that they'll limit, you know, housing construction until the jobs come. And so it's this issue we're facing right now, where they're basically going to put a cap on housing until these jobs come, and we continue to fall short of the housing needs throughout the Bay Area. You have the largest city in the Bay Area basically saying we're going to stop. And so these are the issues we face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you've seen them and you know them, but just to kind of keep them on the forefront.
Yeah, and again, I'm looking broadly at the sustainable community strategy and you just look at a broader way. What's that doing to the housing supply or production in surrounding communities when San Jose chooses to do that? The implications of that on a regional and sub-regional level need to be very thoughtfully considered. Key piece of infrastructure, but it doesn't lead. But it is an integral part of many important initiatives that the governor has. And a decent and safe and affordable place to live is really essential for success. And I think those are the conversations that we've been having, and quite frankly, the new speaker, Toni Atkins, has helped that along because she's such a strong housing advocate.
Right now, Claudia, we're only focusing on regulatory schemes or changes, but I think the issues that we all presented here are far beyond that.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
legislative
funding
changes.
is a big deal.
Yeah, so
you
like
know.
even the CEQA exemption, so do you think maybe that we're gonna get more legislative changes next year after the election's over?
Don't know. But you know, I have my magic 8-ball.
Oh,
You know, our housing problems are 100% self-inflicted. We could, if developers were given a stack of permits that are already signed, we could solve the housing problem in probably 5 or 10 years, because the demand is there and the capacity is there. But places like San Francisco, for example, when I go over there and say, by the way, I'd like to invoke the density bonus because I'd like to build more units on this site, they turn to me and say, what density bonus? And I'm wondering whether HCD, no, seriously, they say, well, we sort of already give you that, so we don't really follow that, even though they don't. They flout the law completely and they just wait for someone to sue. And I'm wondering if it's possible for HCD to perhaps help lead them on the path of righteousness.
He's asking a lot from you guys.
I know.
Well, yeah.
I think that I need to raise the level of discourse about how important housing is to the state's economic development and other of the initiatives that Governor Brown holds dear. And the more positively when I can, I need to make HCD the best it can be. And we are an agency and a department with a lot of very good legacies and history, but we need to sort of roll into the new context of where we find ourselves today, which is much different than even 10 years ago.